Some investigations slowly fade from public attention. Others become even more complicated with every new development. The Nolan Wells case has become one of those investigations. For weeks, people have searched for answers, analyzed every update, and questioned whether the full story has ever been told. Every new piece of information seems to answer one question while raising three more. And just when many believed the investigation had reached a standstill, another shocking development has brought the case back into the national spotlight. But this isn't the arrest many people were expecting. Federal authorities have now arrested a man accused of making threats connected to a judge whose family has been linked to the Nolan Wells investigation. The arrest is not for Nolan Wells' disappearance or death, yet it has added another disturbing chapter to a case that has already captured national attention. So who was arrested? What exactly do federal investigators say happened? Why has this case become so emotionally charged that it has now led to criminal charges beyond the original investigation? And could this latest development have any effect on the search for the truth about what happened to Nolan Wells? Those are the questions we're answering today. But before we get started, if you enjoy fact-based true crime investigations, courtroom updates, and in-depth case analysis that separates confirmed facts from speculation, make sure you subscribe to Brian Case Records, turn on post notifications, and join thousands of viewers who come here for clear, balanced, and reliable coverage of the cases everyone is talking about. Just days ago, the Nolan Wells investigation took another unexpected turn. But this wasn't the kind of update anyone expected. It wasn't a new forensic report. It wasn't the release of surveillance footage. And it wasn't an arrest connected to Nolan Wells' death. Instead, federal investigators announced that a California man had been arrested and charged after allegedly sending violent threats to Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, a judge whose family has become publicly connected to the Nolan Wells case because her stepson, Warren Hudson, was among the last people known to have been with Nolan before he disappeared. According to federal court documents, the suspect is accused of transmitting threatening communications across state lines, a federal offense. Authorities allege the messages included threats of violence and references to the judge's children. The allegations have not been proven in court, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. For many people following this investigation, the immediate reaction was simple. How did this case reach this point? How did an investigation into the death of an 18-year-old student-athlete become so intense that federal authorities are now pursuing criminal cases over alleged threats against people connected to it? The answer isn't simple. Over the past several weeks, emotions surrounding the Nolan Wells case have continued to grow. Social media has been flooded with theories, accusations, demands for arrests, and heated debates over what happened on Horn Island. As public attention increased, so did the pressure on everyone connected to the investigation. Investigators, witnesses, friends, the Wells family, even members of the court system. Federal authorities now allege that one individual crossed a legal line by sending threats that resulted in criminal charges. According to investigators, the case became serious enough for federal law enforcement to step in, identify the suspect, and make an arrest. But that wasn't the end of it. Within days, investigators announced another federal case. This time, prosecutors alleged that an Ohio woman placed dozens of threatening phone calls to Mississippi government offices involved in the Nolan Wells investigation. According to charging documents, authorities say the calls referenced bombs and forced law enforcement to respond, conduct security sweeps, and treat each threat as a potential emergency. No explosives were found, but officials say every threat had to be taken seriously. Like the previous defendant, she is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in court. Think about that for a moment. Two separate federal criminal cases, two different suspects, two different states, all connected not to allegations about Nolan Wells' death itself, but to alleged threats surrounding the investigation. That alone tells you something important. This case has become much bigger than the original mystery. Today, investigators aren't only trying to determine exactly what happened during Nolan Wells' final hours. They're also dealing with the consequences of a nationwide public reaction that has generated enormous attention, intense scrutiny, and, according to federal prosecutors, alleged criminal threats. Even with these arrests, the central questions remain unanswered. What happened to Nolan Wells? Will investigators uncover new evidence? Will the official investigation produce additional charges, if warranted? Or will these latest federal cases simply become another chapter in an investigation that continues to leave the public searching for answers? Those are the questions that continue to drive interest in this case. And as we'll explain next, these federal arrests don't change the fact that the original investigation into Nolan Wells's death remains active. Authorities continue to gather evidence, while Nolan's family continues to seek answers about what happened during those final hours on Horn Island. At first glance, some people might look at these federal arrests and assume investigators have uncovered a major breakthrough in the Nolan Wells investigation. But that's not what authorities are saying. At this point, there has been no public announcement that these federal cases reveal new evidence about Nolan's final hours. Instead, they show something different: just how much pressure this investigation has created for everyone connected to it. When a case captures national attention, emotions can run incredibly high. Families demand answers. Supporters organize online. Critics question every decision made by investigators. Social media users analyze every interview, every photograph, and every public statement, hoping to uncover something that others may have missed. In many ways, that's exactly what happened here. The Nolan Wells case quickly became one of the most closely watched investigations in Mississippi. Thousands of people began sharing theories, discussing possible timelines, and debating whether investigators were moving quickly enough. But federal prosecutors now allege that, in two separate incidents, some individuals went far beyond expressing opinions online. According to court filings, one case involved alleged threats directed at a judge connected to the investigation through her family. In another, prosecutors allege repeated bomb threats were made to government offices handling matters related to the case. If those allegations are proven in court, they represent conduct that can consume law enforcement resources and divert attention away from the work investigators are trying to complete. The defendants in both cases remain presumed innocent unless proven guilty. For investigators, every reported threat has to be treated as real until proven otherwise. That means officers must respond. Buildings may need to be searched. Personnel may have to be evacuated. Investigations are opened. Resources are redirected. Hours or even days can be spent addressing a threat that ultimately has nothing to do with finding answers in the original case. That's one reason officials take these allegations so seriously. While the public often focuses on the mystery itself, investigators are responsible for protecting the people involved in the judicial process and ensuring that the investigation can continue without intimidation or disruption. Even so, the biggest question remains unchanged. What actually happened to Nolan Wells? Despite weeks of public discussion, that question has not yet received a complete public answer. Authorities have continued to investigate, but they have also urged the public to avoid treating rumors as established facts. In a case under active investigation, speculation can spread quickly, making it harder for both investigators and the public to separate verified information from assumptions. For Nolan's family, that distinction matters. Their focus has remained on one goal: learning exactly what happened to their son and seeing the investigation reach a conclusion based on evidence, not rumor, not online pressure, and not speculation. And that brings us to another important question. Could these latest federal prosecutions have any indirect impact on the original investigation, even if they are legally separate? The answer is more nuanced than many people realize. As these new federal cases continue moving through the court system, one question keeps coming up. Could these arrests finally lead investigators to the answers everyone has been waiting for? Right now, the answer appears to be no. Based on what federal authorities have publicly announced, these prosecutions are focused on alleged threats made during the investigation, not on establishing what happened to Nolan Wells. That distinction is extremely important. When people hear the words federal charges, it's easy to assume the government has uncovered new evidence in the underlying death investigation. But these are separate legal matters. One case centers on allegations that threatening messages were sent to Judge Ashley Cole. The other involves allegations that bomb threats were made to Mississippi government offices connected to the investigation. Neither criminal complaint publicly claims to explain Nolan's disappearance or death. Instead, they highlight another reality of high-profile investigations. As public interest grows, so does the pressure on everyone involved. Investigators face constant scrutiny. Witnesses often find themselves discussed across social media. Families endure painful public attention while waiting for answers. And public officials responsible for the legal process can become targets of anger and frustration. That is why authorities say threats of violence are treated as independent criminal offenses. Even if someone believes an investigation is moving too slowly or disagrees with decisions being made, the legal system does not permit threats or intimidation. Those allegations, if proven, are handled separately from the original investigation. Meanwhile, the Nolan Wells investigation itself continues. Investigators have not publicly announced an arrest connected to Nolan's death. They have not publicly identified a suspect in that investigation. And they have not announced that the recent federal threat cases have changed their conclusions or uncovered new evidence about Nolan's final hours. For Nolan's family, that likely means the wait continues. Every new headline brings hope that the next update might finally explain what happened. But these latest developments remind us that not every arrest connected to a case answers the central mystery. Sometimes it reveals something else. It reveals just how emotionally charged a case has become. It shows how intense public interest can create additional legal problems beyond the original investigation. And it demonstrates that law enforcement must respond not only to the original case, but also to any alleged crimes that arise because of it. Even so, the biggest question remains exactly where it has been from the beginning. What happened to Nolan Wells during those final hours? Until investigators release additional findings or announce new evidence, that question remains unanswered in public. And that is why so many people continue following every update so closely. Because everyone is waiting for the same thing. Not another rumor. Not another online theory. But verified answers supported by evidence. At this point, the Nolan Wells investigation stands at an unusual crossroads. On one hand, federal prosecutors are now moving forward with two separate criminal cases involving alleged threats connected to the investigation. On the other hand, the central investigation into what happened to Nolan Wells continues on its own path. Those are two very different legal processes. The federal threat cases will focus on whether the government can prove the allegations made in court. The Nolan Wells investigation, meanwhile, too remains focused on a completely different question, determining exactly what happened during Nolan's final hours, and whether any additional criminal charges related to his death are warranted based on the evidence. For many people watching this case unfold, that's been one of the hardest realities to accept. In today's world, people have become accustomed to instant updates. A breaking headline appears. Social media reacts within minutes, and many expect immediate answers. But criminal investigations rarely move that way. Investigators cannot simply announce conclusions because the public wants them to. Every piece of physical evidence has to be examined. Digital evidence must be analyzed. Witness statements have to be compared against other evidence. When necessary, prosecutors evaluate whether the available evidence can support criminal charges beyond a reasonable doubt. That process often takes far longer than most people expect. And while that can be frustrating for families and the public, investigators generally have one responsibility above all else: to make sure that whatever conclusions they reach are supported by evidence that can stand up in court. That's why law enforcement agencies are often careful about what they release while an investigation remains active. Revealing too much too early could influence witness testimony, affect future interviews, or even complicate a potential prosecution. For Nolan's family, however, every passing day carries emotional weight. They have consistently sought answers about what happened to their son. Like many families facing an unresolved investigation, they continue waiting for the day when speculation is replaced by certainty. And for the thousands of people following this case, patience has become one of the most difficult parts of the story. Every new headline creates hope. Every official update sparks fresh discussion. Every court filing is carefully examined for clues. But the reality is that not every legal development changes the direction of the underlying investigation. Sometimes a headline reflects a separate issue, like the federal threat cases we've discussed today. Those cases are important. They demonstrate that authorities are willing to pursue allegations of threats or intimidation connected to this investigation. But they should not be mistaken for a resolution of the questions surrounding Nolan Wells' death. So where does the investigation go from here? Realistically, there are only a few possibilities. Investigators could eventually announce that additional evidence has led to new criminal charges. They could release further findings that clarify what happened during Nolan's final hours. Or they may continue gathering evidence until they believe the facts are strong enough to support whatever decision comes next. Until that happens, the public should be cautious about treating online speculation as fact. In high-profile cases, rumors often spread much faster than verified information. And while speculation may generate clicks and headlines, It doesn't bring investigators any closer to the truth. Evidence does. Facts do. And ultimately, those are the things that will determine how the Nolan Wells investigation ends. Not social media, not public pressure, but the evidence itself. With that in mind, one final question remains. Could these recent federal prosecutions have an indirect effect on the broader investigation, even if they don't change the evidence? That's where this story becomes especially interesting. As this investigation continues, one thing has become increasingly clear. The Nolan Wells case is no longer just a local story. It has become a case followed by people across the country, with every court filing, every public statement, and every legal development drawing renewed attention. The recent federal prosecutions are evidence of that, not because they answer what happened to Nolan, but because they show how far the impact of this investigation has reached. Think about it for a moment. When an investigation begins, the focus is usually on gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and determining exactly what happened. But in a case that receives national attention, investigators often face an entirely different challenge. They must continue their work while dealing with constant public scrutiny. Every decision is questioned. Every delay is analyzed. Every new development is interpreted in dozens of different ways before all the facts are known. That's why officials repeatedly remind the public that an active investigation cannot be solved through online theories alone. Evidence, not public opinion, is what determines the outcome of a criminal case. And that principle is especially important here. The federal cases involving alleged threats will move through the court system on their own facts and evidence. The Nolan Wells investigation will continue based on its own evidence and legal standards. Those two paths may be connected by circumstance, but they serve different purposes under the law. For Nolan's family, however, the legal distinctions likely matter far less than one simple question. What happened to Nolan? That is the question they have been living with every single day. It's the question supporters continue asking, and it's the question investigators are still working to answer. Until that answer comes, every new headline will naturally attract attention. Some headlines will involve court proceedings. Others may involve investigative updates. And some, like the recent federal prosecutions, will reflect the wider consequences of a case that has drawn extraordinary public interest. What remains important is separating confirmed developments from assumptions. That's how trust is built. It's also how cases like this are best understood. Here at Bryan Case Records, that's exactly what we strive to do. We follow the evidence. We report verified developments. And we avoid turning unanswered questions into established facts. As soon as investigators release new confirmed information, we'll be here to break it down and explain what it means. But now we'd like to hear from you. Do you believe these recent federal prosecutions simply show how much public attention this case has received? Or do you think they demonstrate how emotionally charged this investigation has become for everyone involved? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. And remember that every person mentioned in ongoing legal proceedings deserves the presumption of innocence unless and until proven guilty in court. If you found this update helpful and want more fact-based coverage of developing cases, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Bryan Case Records, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next investigation. Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll continue following this case and bring you verified updates as they become available.